welcome to another edition of Speak Up Presents. Tonight we're going to be talking about the upcoming election and the Florida ballot initiatives. We have with us people who are pretty astute about what's coming up for us to vote on this November. And they are, I'd like to introduce Dr. Linda Chamberlain, Ph.D., who's going to talk to us about the gambling addiction and those kinds of worries. Welcome. I'm really glad that you're here today. Dr. Leanna Fernandez-Fox, who's with the League of Women Voters and very politically savvy and a great math teacher, who said we're going to speak 7 minutes on each amendment so that we get them all covered. And even with your phone calls, so try to get them in that 7-minute slot. And then we have Annette Delisle, who's the president this year of the Hillsborough County chapter of the League of Women Voters. So we've got 8 initiatives for the state of Florida that we're going to have to make decisions on. And we're hearing a lot of spin on television, aren't we? I don't know about you. Have any of you gotten the phone calls with the 25-minute research survey? And it's about the gambling. I know it's truly about the gambling. 25 minutes worth of that one. But let's start off and we'll go in order. The First Amendment, let's talk about that one. And we're all going to jump in and talk about the pros and cons that we have found out about these. So Amendment number 1 will
parental notification.
Parental notification.
Of a minor's termination of pregnancy.
I guess I lost page 2 on my way in here. Okay, here it is. Parental notification of a minor's termination of pregnancy. The legislature shall not limit or deny the privacy right guaranteed to a minor under the United States Constitution as interpreted by the United States Supreme Court. It's interesting the way they write these, isn't it? Because it's not about them denying anything. What it really is about is that they have in the past upheld the minor's right to go ahead and choose to have an abortion privately without her parents' consent. But isn't that interesting the way they wrote that? Shall not limit or deny. Yeah. Which is really something. Okay, so let's all talk about this one. The pros of the argument for saying yes to this amendment. Jump right in.
Well, you know what I think is important and that we don't see, we probably won't see on the ballot is who sponsors these different amendments.
Well, they have names, but they make up these names.
Well, the first one is sponsored by the Florida legislature.
Okay.
So let's get that out, that this amendment is sponsored by the legislature.
Like the one that's for rail, I mean.
Right.
The rail something or other group. I mean, they just make up a name,
Yeah,
right?
Derail the rail or something like that.
Okay.
But
this is the Florida legislature, and what they have tried over and over and over in our history here to try to limit a person under the age of 18 from going to get an abortion without her parents' consent, correct? And we're trying it again.
Well, I think maybe before we go into the discussion of any of these, we probably ought to set the tone of what our discussion will be about, and that will be, first of all, the statement of the amendment.
I'm giving you this show, Leanna. There's no 2 ways about it. Would you get her a show? All right, go.
But what we really want to do is offer both sides today.
All right, let's do it.
Not slant our opinions one way or the other.
But if you have one, will you make an opinion?
I won't, no. It's up to Annette if she wants to give the League's opinion.
Personally, okay, all right. The League does have an opinion on some of these.
It does have positions, but I think the purpose of the show today would be it would serve an excellent purpose if viewers could feel that they were hearing both sides of the argument, including who's sponsoring the amendment. Because sometimes the names of these sponsors sound so wonderful, like Mother's Apple Pie Incorporated. How could you be against that group? And yet there's a hidden agenda underneath there. So hopefully by the end of today's show, they'll hear what the amendment is, what the pro side is saying, what the con side is saying, and most importantly, who sponsored this amendment, who's the one who gathered all the signatures and paid for the signatures to be gathered to get it on the ballot.
Okay. Well, let's talk about the pros, but what I was trying to do is give a little history, which was that this has occurred.
You're right.
They've brought this up 4 or 5 times that I remember in recent, 10 years or so, to try to limit this, and the Supreme Court has not permitted the limitation of the 18-year-old's right to privacy. They've interpreted under that. So they're coming back again, and this time, this is a differently written amendment about the termination of a minor's pregnancy. But in the end, this is written to assure that a child under the age of 18 or a woman under the age of 18 must get her parents' approval before she can get an abortion, correct? And that being said, what are the pros of passing such an amendment? Why don't we just throw them out?
Well, I don't know which, I'm sorry to say, I don't know which newspaper it was this past weekend. I thought they did a really good job of soliciting letters from young women on both sides. And so if readers had time, I think it was the Tampa Tribune that did that, and they gave pro letters and con. So better than all of us here who are not under the age of 18, but young people who are under 18 or recently have been, how they feel about it. So the pro argument is that mandatory parental notification encourages communication with the family and makes the family stronger. So that people who are supporting this amendment feel that that's a valid enough argument to vote for it.
So if the young woman has to go and talk to her parents, it'll encourage communication. Okay.
But then the con of that would be that mandatory parental notification could endanger minors who avoid medical care because they're afraid to tell their parents that they are pregnant, especially girls who are the victims of incest or rape. What I thought was so interesting about one of these letters this weekend was that one of the young ladies wrote in and said it happened to a very good friend of hers while she was in college. She was a freshman under the age of 18. She was 17 years old, extremely close to her family, and a very loving, supporting family. And the young woman never told her parents that she was pregnant, never told, and to this day hasn't told her parents that she had the abortion. So sometimes the con argument tends to portray these young folks as victims of incest or rape or abuse by a parent. So, but this was a case,
consensual
right?
Sex
This was a case where there was a very loving, supporting family, and still she really couldn't tell her family.
For whatever reason.
For whatever reason.
Whether she's embarrassed or feels like she, in some cases,
So that was an interesting perspective that even
would upset the family or something like that.
Right, and someday maybe she will tell them, but she's still not ready to tell them.
Right.
So are we going to ask our callers to call in and ask their
people should call in and give their comments on it as well. I think we're running the telephone number somewhere. I'm sure it's on the screen. We also had here that the reason that it was needed, the pro for this particular amendment this time around, it was needed because the Supreme Court of Florida had struck down a prior parental notification law on the grounds that it violated the minor's right to privacy, and they don't think that this will do the same thing.
It also says that this would require the legislature to provide exceptions and create a procedure for judicial waiver of notification.
Which I understand means that she would have to go to court, essentially, to get a waiver, which is tough enough to do as an adult, it seems.
We do. Oh, look at this.
We have some callers.
Do have
Good.
a call. Let's see who this is. You're on. Speak up.
Yes, good evening, ladies. The First Amendment that you're discussing for us for parental notification, this is an issue that I'm very passionate about, but I'm a single person. I don't have children, but yet I'm very torn about this issue. It's something that's come up quite a bit. To me, on the surface, it seems just void of common sense, the very fact that a young child can go get an abortion without any type of parental notification, considering how as a society we're so careful to make sure that when children under the age of 18 do any kind of medical procedures, there is parental notification. My question to you is, since 2000, when we saw the fact that we tried to avoid having babies in dumpsters, we're looking at the 30-day return policy as far as leaving babies at fire stations like that, have we reached a point in society where we truly don't seem to get the true picture of this, the fact that how can we, are we looking past the point of abortion? Are we not seeing the realization that this is still a child trying to have a child, and if they're going to get a medical procedure that could be this dangerous, how could any parent not want to know what's going on in their child's world? So how do we bridge that gap between those, a right of the child, or is it simply a right of the parent? And for an issue that's so passionate, as a single person who has no children, I'm just floored, and I'm just looking for some answers on this. So if you give me some clarity on this, I would be much appreciative.
Thank you. Thanks for calling, Dean.
Well, I think exactly the way he put it was that the concern is on the part of the parent. We as parents obviously would want to know and would want to help, but the real focus here has to be on the individual, and that's really where the question is when you're going to decide how you vote on this amendment, is taking the perspective of the young woman and the situation that she finds herself in, and whether or not she's able to discuss it with her parents. One of the interesting viewpoints of these letters, again, this past weekend was why isn't there a requirement for the father to notify his parents that he has a child that's going to, or a pregnancy that's going to be terminated? There's nothing there on that side at all. So it's a very difficult question. The people against the con argument is that government should not have this role at all, that this should be between the woman, the doctor, her pastor, her counselor, her parents, whoever it is that's giving her good counsel, and hopefully there is an important adult person in her life.
And the League's position is that the role of the Constitution is to protect the rights of citizens, not to limit them in any way. So they oppose this amendment.
Because of the rights of the 18-year-old, which is guaranteed in our
Under
Constitution.
18, right.
The under 18-year-old. Well, that's why this whole thing in this one sets up a waiver, as Linda pointed out, where you, if you can't talk to your parents, you go to a judge instead. Is that correct?
Well, the judge can grant the waiver.
And the judge can say, okay, I'll do it for your parents who you can't talk to.
Right.
And how often do adults go before judges and are intimidated and can't talk before them?
How's
so
an 18-year-old
how's an
going to do that?
18-year-old going to do that?
17 or 16.
Or 16 or 17.
Going to do that.
Exactly.
It's a very tough call.
It is.
We have
We have
caller?
another caller.
Okay.
Yeah. Hold on a minute. This is Speak Up. You're on Speak Up.
Well, good evening, ladies.
Good evening, Marilyn.
evening.
Yes, ma'am.
How are you?
I'm fine, but I have something to say about this amendment.
Okay.
As you might imagine. Wallflower that I am. Are you there?
Yeah, we're
I'm
trying to get
make
you louder, Marilyn.
Get you a little louder. Go ahead.
Can't speak any louder, ladies.
Yeah, we're
well-
working on the telephone here.
All right, here's the thing. Not a week goes by that we don't hear where a church of some ilk, mainly the Christian churches, as we see in the news, where you have a youth leader or one of their regular pastors who has violated a child, boy or girl. When it's the girl, the family who's tied to this very neat little church doesn't always want to believe the child. They'll believe this person who's wearing their Christianity, saying, "Oh no, it wasn't me." What do you think? What are the odds of that kid getting taken care of medically over her parents not wanting her to? If they say no, she's stuck. And don't we have enough unwanted children in this world? We have a food problem. Do we need more problems like this where someone can't get taken care of? Who's going to take care of that child, especially if it's an unwanted child and the kid is only 14? I'd like to hear you saying on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Well,
It's a very good question.
Okay, go ahead. You take it.
It's a very good question, and there is no doubt in my mind that individuals who will be voting on this are going to call upon their own personal experience, their own personal relationship with their family and their pastor or their counselor or whatever to deal with this. And so they're going to vote as if it was happening to them or their daughter or their niece or their granddaughter. And what we have to think of is those who didn't have that kind of support system or that kind of fallback, I should say, okay, a support system, basically that. to help them through this. So we can't make any generalizations about the kinds of people that vote.
Why don't we
and
just
what-
mandate that parents need to establish really good communication
There you
with
go.
their children and put that in the Constitution? And if
So
you don't maintain
We'll give an
a
FCAT for
very good-
parenting, and if they don't pass it, they can't have
and
kids.
I think this will, Dean's question, I think this is really the solution to the whole thing. What we need to do is just mandate that and jail them if you can't talk to your parent. The parents go to
everybody jail or the kids go to jail?
Everybody goes to jail until you can work it out, because that's why the problem is created, and I think that's why legislators are always having to step in, and we get more and more laws proposed and passed simply because nobody takes responsibility for anything anymore. And certainly it seems to me that, as someone who's raised 3 children, that it is our job to open those lines of communication
Absolutely.
up. And we've got to work on doing that. And so it comes to this. In our Constitution, it appears, in Florida at least, we're one of the few states, there's some good things we do here, that guarantee more rights to people under 18 than the federal Constitution, the national, And so it's really kind of interesting to have this debate and keep trying to pass this law, but the fact of the matter is that we have already given folks under the age of 18 these rights.
So we've used our 7 minutes up now.
We used our 7 minutes.
And then some.
We're gonna move on and look at amendment number 2. Well, I know that 2 and 3 kind of go together, don't they? Oh, I know 1 and 2 actually
No.
go together, don't they? 2 and 3? Is it 2 and 3?
2 and 3.
Okay.
Oh, no.
No.
2 is the constitutional amendments proposed by
Right.
initiative. How
Yeah,
how
but
the
then
Florida-
doesn't, okay, yeah, number 2, okay, I'm sorry, because it had a 2-part to it. It has the part about the Attorney General and what their
Right.
duties are and so forth. Okay, so Leanna, why don't you talk about what constitutional amendment proposed by initiative, what that all, the summary of that one is.
Okay. Let's go to the summary, and then we'll do a little bit of analysis, and then we'll
Right.
go to the pro and con. Proposing amendments to the state constitution to require the sponsor of a constitutional amendment proposed by citizen initiative, which is what these all are, okay, to file the initiative petition with the Secretary of State by February 1st of the year of the general election in order to have the measure submitted to the electors for approval or rejection at the following November's general election, and to require the Florida Supreme Court to render an advisory opinion addressing the validity of an initiative petition by April 1st of the year in which the amendment is to be submitted by the electors. Okay, so the analysis of
Well, the
this...
first thing I want to say
Yeah.
is that was one sentence.
That was, yeah.
And I'm going to guess, just looking at it, that might have been, I don't know, 75 words in one sentence.
Oh,
100,
probably
easy.
100.
100
Yeah.
words in one sentence. And, of course, they have to pass some tests now that they're supposed to be very clear.
Again, the Florida legislature is a sponsor
of
this.
of this
Right.
amendment.
And what it has been in the past now this is requiring that if a group of citizens or any group gets together and wants to propose an amendment to the Constitution in the state of Florida, that they have to provide it to the Secretary of State by February 1. Today, it's only 90 days prior to the election, so they would have only, if this doesn't pass, in other words, it's a 90-day, which gives us, what, August?
About that, yeah.
Yeah, August, September, October, November, right. August, like 4th or what, 2nd.
First week of
this
August.
year. First weekend. So they'd have more time under the way it is now. This would have to be a lot earlier.
Right.
And in addition to that, it has to have gone to the Florida Supreme Court first to make sure it's legal.
Right.
Okay?
And that has to do with the language and the
Okay.
fact that it has to address a single issue. If any of the language at all tends to indicate that there might be more than one issue, and that they can strike it down and the process has to start over again.
This has 2 issues. It has Florida Supreme Court and the date.
Well,
It passed the legislature. Okay, I guess it's not clean 2 issues. It is 1 issue, but it's got 2 requirements under it, right?
Now, what's
Okay, so
interesting
what are the
is...
pros listed here?
Well, wait, let's do one more thing before we go to that.
Okay.
one of the things, a lot of folks have asked us, is Florida the only one that gets themselves mired into this mess of trying to amend the Constitution, try to govern the governors by amending the Constitution? A lot of folks feel that this is the citizens' way of showing their frustration with what is or is not happening in Tallahassee.
Right.
So if something's not occurring, then they take it upon themselves to get this together. Well, what sometimes happens is that it's a very well-funded initiative by someone other than just plain ordinary citizens that get this on the ballot in the same way that citizens would. So what's interesting is that Florida is one of 24 states that give citizens an initiative process. So we're not one of just a few. 24 states is almost half. And the rules vary widely from state to state. However, most of those states let voters propose and pass statutes as well as changing the state constitution. Only Florida, Illinois, and Mississippi do not have a statutory initiative. And we probably should mention...
Doesn't that make more sense
Yeah.
than putting everything like our treatment of pigs into the Constitution?
Absolutely.
Right, and
Yeah.
didn't we do that last year, or was
Right.
that the year before? And now we have to be very careful with baby pigs, and it's in our state constitution. And while I think that's, lovely for pig lovers and animal lovers of all sorts, it doesn't seem like it should have been in the Constitution. Okay, so we do have that,
go
but
to
we
the
don't
pros
have
and
the, maybe
cons.
we need an initiative to allow us to make laws.
Maybe we need
Rather-
some lawmakers who will make some laws.
Yeah. There you go. All right. And that's...
Yes,
jump
on
in
that
here
note,
with- You jump in here with the pros and cons of
Okay,
amendment number 2.
the pros, supporters and opponents will have more time to advance thoughtful arguments supporting or opposing proposed initiatives. The con to this is citizens' rights organizations are worried of limiting the public's right to force the legislature to act on issues that a majority of the citizens deem important when lawmakers are swayed by lobbyists and are unwilling to address the issue.
It's a valid one, huh?
Very valid.
So we have any
Okay.
callers calling in their opinions on this?
They're
No, not
jumping
yet.
about the
Okay.
Constitution. Well, I think I said the magic word pigs, and we call them very... Also, okay, here's another pro. All publication of certified citizens petition initiatives are put on hold until no less than 90 days prior to elections. Establishing an earlier deadline allows all entities that must review and respond to do so without a time crunch. So it actually puts a deadline on the Supreme Court, and it puts a deadline on the legislature.
Right.
So that's a good thing about it.
Did we already mention who supports this initiative?
You said the
Florida Chamber.
legislature.
Yeah, I said the
believe.
Florida
The Florida
legislature.
Chamber.
And now they're
Florida
saying
Chamber.
that by making the deadline so much earlier, it would reduce the number of amendments to the Florida Constitution by special interest groups by making it more difficult and more expensive. So I don't know how it got to be more difficult and more expensive by moving the date up. Do you know?
Well, we wouldn't have as long to gather the signatures.
Right.
Okay, you just start earlier, correct?
Well, a lot earlier.
And-
We're
Okay,
talking-
but
and they
why
have
would
more
it make it
steps.
more
And they have
expensive?
more steps
Yeah.
to get it on the
Alvin,
ballot.
not to worry. When you tell me there's somebody on the phone, I'm going to get it when I'm ready. But I'm seeing you. Okay, we got somebody on the phone. You're on Speak Up.
Hi. I think when you made your first statement, summed the whole thing up when you said how long the sentence was. That one sentence. And I think that's pretty much what this is all about. It gives more time to cut down the citizens doing what they want to do. If we're a government for the people and by the people, there should not be any problem with the people doing these type of things. And if we don't want it, then we vote it down. So and if you would allow me just one quick second
Absolutely.
to voice my opinion on your previous statement about the abortion issue, I'll make it real quick.
Yes, ma'am.
I think when they allow a child, sometimes 13 or 14 years old, to make a decision on whether or not they would tell their parent, if they're going to allow that to happen, which they already have, I think they should give them also the tools to go make a doctor's appointment for themselves, go get their own birth control, be their own health care advocate for other things also that surrounds the the birth of a child as well as getting prenatal care. Because I'm a school nurse, and I'm telling you, we can't talk and bring up certain things with these kids like birth control pills. You can't do vaginal exams on them. So if they're not incorporating their parents into their decisions, then they're not getting the help that they need. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's a great point.
Well, so I think another point for increasing, sending the parents to jail who aren't talking to these kids. I'm sorry.
Okay, so we need to write that
Somebody's
down
gonna
under
take me up on
solution for
that.
Amendment 1.
And you will see someday in the future a citizen initiative
You're right.
by a group called, I don't know. Okay.
So the con argument here is that the earlier deadline makes it hard for grassroots citizen petition initiatives to get the signatures they need for a timely delivery of their amendment proposal. Each additional step that must be taken makes it harder for citizens to participate in government. So we're back to, again, the well-funded commercial type signature gathering initiatives will happen in whatever time frame they have to make it happen. They'll just put enough money into it to make it happen. And the citizen initiatives, the ones that are started by grassroots organizations that stand in front of Publix every Saturday morning to get signatures. The first question I ask when someone approaches me now is, who's paying you? And everyone around me goes, why is she asking that? And then they're surprised when the people answer me and tell me who's paying them.
Well, and
they all assume
I
that they're
remember
citizens.
a few years ago with and I'm a smoker, everybody knows that. There was someone outside the post office wanting me to sign the amendment to put the initiative on to ban smoking. And I said, I'm sorry, I'm a smoker, and I think, businesses can figure all that out. And he said, oh, no, this is going to give you more rights. And I thought, wow, is that a line or what? And I listened to the whole pitch, and he made it like, now, if we do this, when I said, adios, I'll see you, try that on somebody else, it might work, and it certainly did, because I'm sure that they got enough signatures. They got them also from the smokers who weren't paying attention. So, it's a great
So
point.
people
Let's
should
go.
always ask when they're asked to sign a petition.
And I guess on that one, you
paying
have
you
to
to do that?
think. You have to think about that one quite a lot. How about Amendment 3? This is interesting. There's been a huge push on the medical liability claimants compensation amendment, which proposes to amend the Constitution to provide that an injured claimant who enters into a contingency fee agreement with an attorney in a claim for medical liability is entitled to no less than 70% of the first $250,000 in all damages received by the claimant and 90% of damages in excess of $250,000, exclusive of reasonable and customary costs and regardless of the number of defendants. This amendment is intended to be self-executing. I find this kind of fascinating. Who is it that's sponsoring this?
Citizens for a Fair Share Incorporated, a group supported by the Florida Medical Association.
So what they think, they're not doing this for the people, correct? Because the person could negotiate their own contingency fee with their lawyer, right? They're doing this, there's a purpose for this. Let's limit the amount of money a lawyer can get. I'm mad at lawyers. Is that correct?
Well, that seems to be the point. The background
The point is,
says,
how do we
Right.
and they're claiming by limiting an attorney's fee, if
That
they
that's gonna
limit,
take care of it.
that this is
Right.
going to reduce medical malpractice claims. If you're a bum doctor, you're a bum doctor, you're a bum doctor, you're going to get sued. Correct? I don't know. Okay. Let's see. What do we got here? Pro. This amendment would ensure that a greater part of the settlement would go to the injured party. Attorneys now get 30 to 40%. Okay. But I think, I keep thinking that the whole thing, Annette, what do you think? What have you got as another pro?
Is this the one where we see all these commercials, inundated with commercials?
There's a lot of them.
And it's really hard for people out there to understand all of this. It's hard for me to understand all of this. And it's so hard to understand that the league is not taking a position on this one because on the face of it, you can't grasp a hold of it, of what it's all about, like you asked, and is it a pro or a con?
I just can't imagine the next Constitution, amendment about how much a plumber can charge, or someone who fixes your TV. Let them do whatever they need to do. I think the largest problem, and I know you didn't want to take opinions, but I have a lot of them, and I have a TV show. so
So you get to say
I
them.
get to say them. I don't know. I might change them next week, but nonetheless, here they are today.
Your prerogative.
I just think to try to dictate, certainly a person can negotiate a different contingency fee. But I think the thing is that if a lawyer wasn't going to get 30 or 40%, and he's putting all his time or she into a case, and you want them to, do well and so forth, because if they do well, they're doing all the work, and you're getting 60 or 70%. So, but you're not having to put the money out except for court costs and so forth.
And should this be a constitutional issue, or should it be a statute, or some other form?
And is that going to limit the number of lawyers who take cases? Are they going to say, look, it's just not worth it to me to take that case because it's going to take me 400 hours to prepare for that case.
I'm going to work just as hard.
And I'm going to work that hard.
Hopefully.
And then maybe I'm going to walk out with $20,000. I'll go under in no time.
Well, I'm not really familiar with what it is they get now. Is it like 50%?
30 or to 40. I think when they get to
40?
well, I think what they do is the only agreements I've ever seen on attorneys is that when it does get higher, they lower it. So they may be at 1/3 up to whatever, $100,000. After that, 25%, because they know they're covered more or something. They may lower
Okay,
it.
so let's do the math.
Let's do
Now,
the math.
let's do the math.
We brought a math teacher.
Right. So if you have $1 million settlement now, this would say then that the attorney would get 30% of the first $250,000,
Right,
Right.
75,000.
and no less than 90% of the rest goes to the claimant. So 10% of anything in excess.
So
of
another
250,000.
75,000.
Right. And so another 75,000. So that's considerably less than 30% of $1 million, which would have been 300,000.
Right. So they'd walk away
So
with
we're
150
talking,
instead.
yes, we're talking a lot of money here.
It's a lot of thinking to do. We've got somebody on here. You're on Speak Up.
Hi, I think the lawyers are such a strong group that the minimum that they usually start out is with 30%. But I think if that amendment passes, that if they can make the attorneys lower the minimum amount, that they would develop a competition in a sense. Right now, they are competing right now, but yet still the amounts are pretty much fixed about how much they can take or how much they can't take with the amount of money. But I think that if they broke the group's ties to one another, saying, okay, you have to take, you have to take less if somebody says, I'm only going to pay you 20% or 10%. Now, then you could have attorneys who can legally, out of their group, compete against one another, say, look, I charge only, 15% for the first. You know what I'm saying? Just like they're doing now with the real estate. Some people are only taking 2% or what have you.
It's like fixing
But,
prices.
thank you for that thought. What I was just wondering is, though, can't they do that now? Can't they now say, I'll take less than the 30%?
Oh, I think they can.
Yeah,
sure they
have to.
Individually,
No,
yes.
restricting.
but
Individually.
not make it a blanket.
Right. I mean, if I'm just getting started, I might want to say, look, I'll only take, because I need a
Right.
few good cases under my belt before I can start making more money. All right, we're going to.
And then whoever you sued goes bankrupt and you never collect any of it anyway, so.
And that may be so, too. And all that work still went into it by the lawyer. I don't think that, I think the doctors have been sold a bill of goods if they think that's going to reduce their malpractice claims, though.
So did we
I think
give
they just
enough
have to-
pro and con on that one? Did we give
Well,
both?
we're going to move to Amendment 4 anyway.
Okay.
Because
Or 7 minutes
because I'm looking
Because
at
the
this.
boss,
I'm looking
yes.
at this
Okay.
watch here, and I said to you, we'll go back to it if we have time.
okay.
How's that?
We're going to talk more about doctors.
Okay, Amendment 4, which is Linda. Linda's going to jump in on this one. I know that.
Yeah.
All right, Linda, you want to read what Amendment 4 is about?
Amendment 4 authorizes Miami-Dade and Broward County voters to approve slot machines in pari-mutuel facilities. And the summary of the amendment is that it authorizes Miami-Dade and Broward counties to hold referenda on whether to authorize slot machines in existing licensed pari-mutuel facilities. Those are thoroughbred and harness racing, greyhound racing, and highlight. that have conducted live racing or games in that county during each of the last 2 calendar years before effective date of this amendment. The legislature may tax slot machine revenues, and any such taxes must supplement public education funding statewide. If passed, the amendment requires implementing legislation. So.
Now, I will tell you, I was at the Hard Rock on Saturday night and won $250, so I just...
We'll talk.
Okay. You can talk to me. All right.
So it wouldn't affect you though, right? This is only for Miami-Dade.
Well, the whole state is voting on
Whether
allowing
Miami-Dade,
Miami-Dade
Right.
to
Right.
vote themselves on this subject.
Whether they can be allowed to vote.
But it
yes or
does
not.
limit Miami-Dade.
Yes, those are the only two locales right now that are going to vote on this. Now, it doesn't mean that other communities, other counties couldn't in the future.
It's only one county, Miami-Dade.
Or Miami-Dade and Broward. Broward.
And Broward. Oh,
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
two counties.
Right.
Miami-Dade and Broward, and
Right.
what's going to, and they're saying, this is the one I got the 25-minute survey on.
Mm-hmm.
And they gave me every reason that they could think of that would that impact my vote. If it was just for education, would that impact the way I'd vote? If it was confined to just Miami-Dade and not Broward, would that impact my vote, et cetera? If it was just for horse race, what did I think about horse racing and
So you hung on there for the full 25 minutes?
I'd love to hear what they're going to ask. They did throw in a presidential, who are you voting for, and also our state senate race with Betty Castor in it. And but they just kept coming back to that one, and they spent an awful lot of time on it. So I was very interested in that.
Well,
The
perhaps
sponsor,
would
the sponsor
help
for this
explain
is Floridians for a Level Playing Field.
And who are they?
Whoever they are.
Whoever
those
they are.
people are. I
They're
don't know
probably
if
not soccer players. I'm not sure, but my guess is that I think, and I'm fairly new to Florida. I've transplanted here about a year ago, so I'm still getting acquainted with all the ins and outs of Florida and gambling here. But I think it's certainly very similar to what I saw in other places in Nevada. Well, not Nevada so much, but certainly in Colorado when I lived there, where the gaming industry looks for ways to begin to expand, and this is a very common one, that they look at going into to racetracks. They've certainly done that in many other states across the nation, and I think one of the things that certainly has been happening is that all these revenues are taxable, and the taxes are then earmarked to go usually to things like education or parks or other wonderful things that everybody wants. We want better schools, we want parks, we want better recreation facilities or roads or what have you. Here it's pretty clearly earmarked for education. So that's certainly, I think, the selling point.
It
on
usually is.
Yeah, that's usually what it's made to do.
But what they do then is reduce the amount of funding they were giving
Exactly.
education in the first place, like
Right.
they did with the lottery.
Yeah,
Which
that's
it was
the
gonna
real dilemma.
supplement it, but then
Yeah.
it didn't, and then so it's just taking it out of one piggy bank and throwing
putting
it in another, and
Yeah.
you can still do your pork barreling
Right,
somewhere. It just gets shifted around.
exactly, yeah.
I'm not clear on this. Does that mean that the slots in the casinos, like the Seminole Reservation casinos, are going to be taxed?
No, you can't
No.
tax
Can't
the
tax
Indians.
those. Those
Okay.
are,
They're not
right.
taxed.
No, I think what they're saying is
They're
there's a
just gonna
lot
put
being
slot
spent.
machines.
There's being a lot spent right now in slot machines, and in the state of Florida by the Indian-operated
Right.
casinos.
Right.
They're not taxable.
Right.
Here's a way that they will be taxable, and we will be able to get something out of it. We're losing money, is what the
That was
state
my
is saying.
question. I'm not sure that that's what this says, though. It says that Miami-Dade and Broward are going to decide whether or not to authorize slot machines in existing pari-mutual facilities.
Horse racing
That's
and
the
dogs.
racetracks.
Right.
Not pari-mutual, or they have horse racing, dog racing, and in Miami-Dade they also still have highlight, which we
Right.
don't have anymore. So what they're saying is, we're not authorizing the construction of new casinos.
Exactly.
Where slot machines are going in. In fact, you have to have already been in business for 2 years.
Right.
Before this is enacted.
Yeah.
So you better be already operating one of these other three things. I think there's only 3 things, right?
That's it,
That's
right,
it.
just the track.
Horse racing, dog racing, and the
highlight.
greyhound racing, and
Highlight.
the highlight. Okay, so now if you were getting ready for this, you probably opened a highlight place up in the last 2 years. right? And you could probably pretty much figure out who funded this by looking at who did one in the last 2 years, or at least year, and then this won't be effective for a year, so that is the way it'll go.
Exactly.
What it doesn't do is say, then can I get rid of the dogs later and just have slot machines?
Doesn't prohibit that, apparently.
No, it doesn't.
No,
Right.
it doesn't. And as somebody who does really, I do like slot machines. I think they're great and fun and everything. I really don't think they're really good for a community. I mean, I'd rather go out of town if I was going to do it or whatever, and I'm just worried about people
I think
more
the
than
bigger
anything.
question in people's minds is going to be whether or not it is indeed going to supplement education. I mean, we've been down this road before. We
Right.
fell for it the first time. Shame on
Right.
us.
Shame on
Shame on them
us,
or
right.
whatever. But this time it would be shame on us
Right.
if we fell for it
Right.
again.
And,
'Cause I think
and
they're-
I think it's interesting that they put in the con arguments, who drew these up, by the way, the league? These
Yes,
pro
state
and
league.
cons?
State league.
Yes.
They did a really great job of
Yeah.
that, and under the con, I think this is one you would get into, Linda, was the fact that casinos exacerbate social problems, divorce, compulsive gambling, bankruptcy, and illegal activities to pay off debt. The amendment does not provide for prevention, education, or outreach to compulsive gamblers.
Well,
Because it's an easy thing to do to become addicted to gambling.
That's certainly, the other big concern is what the impact's going to be for people in Florida who do gamble. Most have a good time, it's not a problem, but for those that it is, anytime you increase the accessibility and availability, it's going to up those numbers. Right now, we estimate that probably with existing forms of gambling, there's probably about 500,000 people that have serious gambling problems in Florida. And part of the
Wow.
dilemma is with this type of legislation is that there's not any monies devoted to prevention, education, and not to treatment. There's not any money devoted to treatment services for compulsive gamblers in Florida at all, other than just hotline and so forth that the lottery has funded. But I think anytime I see legislation that's being proposed that doesn't have some aspect of a requirement to fund some of the effects of what passing the legislation will create, that certainly concerns me. And that's probably the biggest, one of the biggest questions that I have.
Well, they're
is-
saying that the pro for this slot machines will draw more tourists to Florida. Hardly likely. We're known for other things, beaches and Disney.
Well,
The
just
other
depends
dilemma
on how they
too
promote
is
it.
anytime you introduce
Yeah.
casinos into an area, even though these will be in the existing racetracks, I think what it begins to do is it begins to really limit people going to other sorts of more local attractions, more local
Well,
attractions and
that is,
activities.
it does say that one of
Yeah.
the cons to this is that restaurants see less business.
Exactly.
Performing arts see less business because you can go out and just do that instead of doing something else with that same money.
But one of the pro arguments is funding for education. I mean, nobody else is talking about any revenue streams to bring some money into education. So it tends to come, if it's not going to be on property taxes, or it's not, I mean, we're finding more and more counties individually passing property taxes. Pinellas County is going to raise property taxes about $65 per $150,000 home so that they can raise the salaries of Pinellas County teachers. So individual counties are taking on that kind of a reform, but it doesn't look like anyone statewide wants to say the tax word at all.
Yeah.
And so this is how they're going to slide by making, quote unquote, a sin tax or a tax on something that's not so universal as property tax is. And it is
Well,
going
we'll
to
do
provide.
anything here not to have an income tax,
Oh,
as you know.
obviously.
I mean, we'll tax everything about us. I mean, just how
To
many
me,
eyebrows I have.
the bigger question is,
let's tax
if not
that
this
because
tax,
I don't want an income
then
tax.
where is the money going to come from to
Right.
fund education?
Another, something silly like that, you know, like maybe how many caps I have. And
There you go.
something.
I know
because
somebody
they're
that would be happy
definitely
about
not gonna- Yes, I know.
The League of Women Voters opposes this amendment because it opposes gambling in Florida. In addition, the League believes that there's no source of revenue that should be specified, limited, exempted, or prohibited in the Constitution. Okay?
No designated dollars.
Right.
Again, getting back to the main question is what should be and shouldn't be
Right.
in the Constitution.
Right.
I think we're a long way down that road already to try to fix that. It's the
Well,
cows
we
are
just
out.
haven't, when we
pigs
don't.
are
The pigs are out.
Pigs are in, cows are out.
But as we will see soon, when we make a constitutional amendment that we don't like, we just make another one to get rid of it.
Oh, I can't wait till we
I
get to
just
that.
can't wait
Yeah.
for that.
Yeah.
I like number 5, Florida minimum wage amendment.
Okay, let's go with that.
This says that Florida would make sure that the minimum wage was $1 more right now than the federal government requires. It's $5.15 an hour now. And Florida would start at $6.15. Now, California's got one at $8, I think it is. I was just out in California. They made a state constitution make it $8, and then also that it then was indexed to something like inflation. And this would be indexed to inflation. Now, I did a show on the living wage some months ago, and it looks to me like you can't live for under $12 an hour. I mean, they showed it, they proved it, you know. You can't buy, and that's not going to the movies. That is just paying your rent in what is an average rent in Florida, in the Bay Area at least. And $6.15, as they pointed out here, is worth a whopping $12,000
Incredible.
a year. $5.15 is $10,712. This only gives you $280. Excuse me, $2,080 more
A year.
if you were making that $5.15.
That's
And
gross.
Huh?
That's
the
gross. That's not net.
And we already know that the poverty level is $15,260 for a family of 3. So, and I mean, I don't even know who could do that, but okay.
Well, the people who are against this are saying that this was not intended to be a salary or a wage for someone supporting a family. And more we're hearing,
Oh, because we all like to work for fun.
well,
So-
what they're saying is that the minimum wage was intended for high schoolers who've got part-time jobs at McDonald's. Well, the reality is that there are a lot of single moms supporting 2 and 3 children on minimum wage jobs. And so the $6.15 is still not going to
Oh, not
help them
only
do
that,
that.
you ever go into a pizza place or a convenience store? I don't want to name any name, or a fast food place, and ever get in a conversation or overhear one? I've heard countless ones of these where, the kid will pick up the phone and say, "Oh no, I've been working. I worked 70 hours this week because Susie didn't show up again, and I'm having to do her shift." And then they hang up the phone and go to take care of me, and I say, "Boy, you're making a lot of overtime, aren't you?" And the person says, "Oh no, I'm not allowed to make overtime. They made me a manager." How many people do you manage? None. Okay. Do you know you should call the Florida Department of Labor, the U.S. Department of Labor? There's a lot of people making minimum wage and working more hours and then not getting any of the overtime because they're kind of
Classified.
they're classifying them crazy. So I just think it's not fair. It may cost business a few more bucks, which ultimately costs us, right, the consumer.
Well, and another argument against this would be that they're saying businesses can't afford to have as many employees at this rate, at the higher rate, so that there's going to be layoffs, there's going to be, there's going to be retribution of some sort, that they cannot be told how much to pay their employees.
They are told by the
So
federal
who's
government.
supporting this? Tell us, do we have any groups who are supporting this?
This was, ACORN is.
Oh, that's right,
The big thing-
Association of Community
Right,
Organizations.
and that's who I had on my
for
show.
reform.
Yeah.
And let me say this, though. They prove without a shadow of a doubt that if you raise the minimum wage, you lower the amount of other kinds of supplemental help and WICS programs and milk and all kinds of subsidies that you have to do anyway, in addition to which, when people don't have money, they don't go to the doctor. And so then you end up with sicker people at emergency rooms and so forth, and it just goes on and on and on. And it's just not fair, I don't think. And also the part of this that really got me was I guess I didn't realize this, the federal minimum wage for tipped employees is only $2.13 an hour if the employee receives at least $5.15 when the tips are combined.
Right.
Right.
You know, I almost want to now when I go into
And if
any
not, the
place-
employer
this
has
is what
to
I
make
wanna
that
do.
up.
I think we should all do this. We go to a restaurant, we say to the waitress, do you get the minimum wage with or without tips? I just want to know that, because if you don't, I'm not eating here anymore.
You mean, is the employer
Yeah, is the
paying them,
employer
doing
What
counting
they're
on
supposed to do.
how badly and how much should we support that kind of practice? And so this would give them a whopping $3.13 an hour guaranteed. I don't know. I just I have a problem with it. Okay, let's go to the repeal of
One
the
thing we
high-speed
didn't say is
rail.
that it hasn't been raised in
Well,
6
I'm
or
going to have
7
to
years.
keep this show going an extra half an hour.
Just
which
for that.
They will shoot me. Okay, but amendment, we're going to go fast now. Amendment 6, 7, and 8 here. The repeal of the high-speed rail amendment, and that's really about, when did we pass that? Is that 2 or 3 years
I think it was
already?
98,
In 1998. I did not
No,
vote.
2000.
2000.
2000. I remember not voting for this. Did you vote for this? Okay, but it
didn't
went through even without us.
Right, even without us.
I mean, there have been presidents elected without me, too.
And me too.
May- I hope not in the future, however. Okay, so Amendment 6. Okay, so what happened in 2000 is we passed a constitutional requirement that there be high-speed rail. Is that correct?
We
High-speed
develop it
ground
and
trans-
operate it.
Right, which they have now figured out is going to only cost $20 million a mile, or something like this. And Jeb never liked it anyway, and he said right from the beginning, I won't do it anyway, and wasn't he quoted saying that? It'll never happen, and it hasn't. So we are
Yeah.
4 years later, and now is this the Florida legislature again?
Nope, this is, the sponsor to this is Derail the Bullet Train.
Incorporated. Derail the bullet train, okay.
This amendment repeals an amendment in the Florida Constitution that requires the legislature, the cabinet, and the governor to proceed with the development and operation of a high-speed ground transportation system by the state and/or by a private entity. So that's the summary of the ballot.
And it means we're going to get rid of this but the big problem is that the majority of people in the state of Florida, whether they understood it well or not, or as cost well or not, voted to have it. And is it a good idea to repeal something that people voted to have? I guess we'll find out, because we'll see who repeals it. We've only got 5 minutes.
Okay.
So your 7 minutes is totally gone now. You got 2.5 minutes a second here. Amendment 7, the patient's rights to know about adverse medical incidents, which says that current Florida law restricts information
Right.
available to patients related to the investigation of adverse medical incidents such as medical malpractice, although we do have a website that we can go on and check that out. I mean, I usually check out doctors on there. This amendment would give patients the right to review, upon request, records of healthcare facilities or providers' adverse medical incidents, including those which could cause injury or death. So, what do you think of that one? We would all be able to access the records of doctors and hospitals and others in the medical field and find out whether or not they had malpractice claims against them.
Okay. The pro to this is the Floridians should have access to information regarding actions of providers and medical facilities that have harmed patients. The second pro is the initiative respects patient confidentiality. The con is this proposal does not differentiate between actions that caused harm and actions that have not been determined to have caused harm. The definition of which records can be accessed is too broad. This complex issue should be addressed by statute. It is not appropriate for inclusion in the Florida Constitution.
And did the league take a position?
They did not take a position on this, but again, they feel that it's an issue that should be addressed by statute,
Right.
not inclusion in the Florida Constitution.
Whenever they come to that conclusion, then it's no position.
Okay.
Yeah.
Amendment 8, with 3 minutes to go and counting. Public protection from repeated medical malpractice. Current law allows medical doctors who have committed repeated malpractice to still be licensed in the state of Florida, because we're so fair. This amendment prohibits medical doctors who have been found to have committed 3 or more incidents of medical malpractice from being licensed to practice in Florida.
This sponsor is the Floridians for Patient Protection, a group supported by the Florida trial lawyers.
And did the league take a position on that one?
No, they did not.
I think those are difficult questions too, simply
Shouldn't
because
be in the Constitution.
it shouldn't be in the
It's
Constitution.
addressed by statute.
And that's a big problem because sometimes a medical claim is paid before, even though they'll pay off, even though they don't think they caused the harm. So that's a tough one to decide, isn't it? I want to thank all 3 of you for joining me, and we can talk about 30 seconds about one thing or another. But I want to make sure that I thank you and the folks that have joined us to put on this program, everyone at Public Access, Alvin for his patience with get that phone, and Angelo. Thank you very much, guys. Dan Pistano, who's back there, Teresa, and of course, Mary and David as well for all their help with this production. And I want to thank all of you for coming down and spending some time with us. Which one of these bothers you the most of these amendments? Why don't we just go down the line? Linda?
Well, mine's pretty easy, number 4.
The gambling.
Right.
And you're going to vote personally for or
Personally,
against?
I'm going to vote against. I
You are.
think that if there was some money set aside for the Florida Council to provide some services.
Then you'd go with it. Leanna,
It's repealing the bullet train bothers me.
you don't want to repeal it?
It's not that. I just don't believe we ought to put it back on the ballot again after the voters have voted.
Okay. And Annette?
The philosophy against putting things on the Constitution that should be legislated.
All right. Okay, well, thanks so much for all your thoughts, and I hope you'll all tune in to our show next time. We'll see you then. Thank you for tuning in.